Congestion. One of the few things we can pretty much still all agree is not great, especially for anybody who occasionally likes to use the street, whether you're in a car or not. But congestion pricing, our attempt to improve congestion, is a term that is hated almost as much as congestion itself, at least by some. New York has found itself synonymous with congestion pricing lately, and we'll talk about that. But New York could very well just be the first in a new wave of a congestion pricing renaissance. So today we're going to explore the impacts and benefits of congestion pricing and rank the top 5 cities around the world that have the most to gain by implementing it. And all that and more is coming up on Transit World. Videos on all things transportation, with a focus on the developing world. What is congestion pricing? Well, it's more or less what the name implies. It's a price paid by cars that are causing congestion. It's basically a toll, but the main difference is that money is specifically collected in the name of combating congestion and/or improving alternative modes of transit, and not just to pay for the construction of a roadway or provide money to a general fund. There's 2 types of congestion pricing, one where you price a specific road, and another where you price entry into a zone of a city. The second is often called cordon pricing. And we will be focusing on the second one for this video, since it's the most impactful, it's the most innovative, and it's the most controversial. There is a good argument that we may be about to see a wave of congestion pricing in cities throughout the world. At least I think it's a good argument because I'm about to argue it. Here it is. Congestion pricing works. Yeah, there is still some controversy over the exact efficacy of congestion pricing, but there are a couple of general takeaways that are pretty well documented and agreed on. At least among people that study these things and not just people that start internet flame wars. The first is that traffic does drop in congestion pricing. Usually more at first and less over time, especially if pricing isn't properly adjusted, but you still see a trend towards less VMT per capita over long term. And you're able to maintain drive times even as more road space is allocated away from cars. Second, there's a lot of co-benefits to congestion pricing. Streets are generally safer, quieter, less polluted inside the congestion zone, and can often decrease traffic and pollution outside the zone as well. There's a lot of great recent data from New York on this. Now, it has only been 6 months and the sample size is pretty small, so take these findings with a grain of salt. But still, these overall trends have been seen in other cities with congestion pricing too. And the third thing congestion pricing does is it raises money for transit projects, usually on the order of several $100 million annually for a large city. New York City is actually on track for about $1 billion in annual revenue. And yes, a decent portion of this money, often 20 to 40%, may need to go to administer and enforce congestion pricing itself, but this is becoming smaller over time as technology has improved. And these technological improvements are really the key reason I think we may start to see other cities implementing congestion pricing soon. Singapore was quite the pioneer when they implemented the first congestion pricing scheme way back in 1975. But since the turn of the 20th century, congestion pricing has been able to use electronic tolling more and more, which is a big reason that there was a wave of other early adopter cities that implemented congestion pricing in the last 25 years or so. Now, the rise of camera and AI technology has dramatically reduced the friction and cost to implement congestion pricing. So are we actually about to see a surge in cities adopting congestion pricing? Obviously, no one knows, but I think we very well could, and we certainly should. So let's take a look at the top 5 cities in the world that would benefit the most from implementing congestion pricing. Actually, I'm going to hit on the top 10, but focus just a bit more on the first 5, since this video, it goes on and on and on and on. I still don't like that song. So first, I developed a base list by looking at the top 100 cities ranked in the TomTom Traffic Index report. And this report's not perfect. It kind of seems to overrepresent Europe, especially UK, and underrepresent Asia, especially China. But it is an international traffic database, which is hard to come by. And this is a well-known index based on real data, and it's free. I'm specifically looking at the city center traffic, not the metro area, since the city center is typically where the most acute traffic is, and also where you would almost certainly center your congestion zone. TomTom has a few different metrics, and there actually is quite a lot of debate about how to best measure traffic. No metric, of course, is perfect, but I am going to rank based on congestion level percentage. Sometimes called travel time index or peak to base ratio, this is basically a measure of how much extra time is spent traveling in a city center with average traffic compared to free flow conditions. I'm eliminating cities with metro areas with fewer than 5 million people. This focuses on cities where the aggregate effect of traffic is most severe, and it also focuses on cities with more political potential to enact congestion pricing. These are likely places with more people that use transit or otherwise do not drive on a regular basis, and therefore these cities have more and more sophisticated advocacy against single occupancy vehicles. These are also places that face larger issues with local pollution and contaminants, and likely have the political will that comes with that. We'll talk more about politics in just a second. Next, I measured the quality of transit in each city. Congestion pricing is the stick to get people out of their personal vehicles, but you also best have some carrots to convince them that they have a good alternative to driving, or at least a plausible alternative. So I'm looking at the level of transit in the city, but specifically examining how well transit connects to and within likely congestion pricing zones. This is part art, part science, although honestly it's mostly the former. However, I am generally looking at two things. First, how many high-quality transit lines connect into the city center, and I'm defining high quality as rail and BRT, with only partial points for less frequent connections like commuter rail. Second, I want to look at how well high-quality transit may cover the area within the proposed congestion zone. So less points for city centers with one big transit hub or one major trunk route, more if transit forms a grid with more coverage in the city center. Now, let's talk a little bit more about politics. For pretty much every city on this list, I don't know the ins and outs of public sentiment and political agendas for or against congestion pricing, but I did look at a few things to roughly approximate this. I gave extra points for cities that had one or more of the following three things. The first is existing restrictions on how often you can drive during peak hours. This is typically done by rotating which license plate numbers are allowed to drive in and around the city center each day. And no, I'm not adding or subtracting points for enforcement or compliance with these laws. That's probably a topic for its own video. Second, I'm adding points for cities with existing dynamically priced toll roads, essentially roads that change their price based on congestion. This is already a form of congestion pricing, and the rationale is that drivers will already be familiar with the idea that high-demand roads cost more to use. And third, extra points if there's a serious recent proposal by the government for congestion pricing. And lastly, we need to set some boundaries. I want to prioritize cities with easy-to-define boundaries to form the congestion zone. Congestion pricing is already a really complicated concept, so it's best if you can make the boundaries as simple as possible to understand for the traveling public. Generally, if the average resident could describe the boundary in a sentence, you get full points. If it would take a paragraph, I'm going to give you 1 point. And if it takes a Google search, 0 points. All right, so then I assign scores for each of these criteria. Congestion is the most important and represents half of the total score, and I decrease the points for each of the factors as you get towards the end of the list. So here's the results. Number 5, Bangkok. This is the second highest congestion score ranked by TomTom, but it fell to 5th on my list because there's really no easy way to draw a good boundary that encircles the core congestion. I am going to attempt to draw what I think would be a good zone map for each of these 5 cities. To make these zones, I first looked at where typical traffic is heaviest, and this is based on both broad zone traffic data from TomTom and slightly more detailed corridor traffic data during the peak hour from Google. Then I considered nearby places that could serve as an obvious boundary. These are highways, mountain ranges, waterways, etc. Obviously, you would need to conduct a much more detailed study to actually set these boundaries, considering city jurisdictional borders, more detailed analyses of traffic flows and bottlenecks, specific entry points for tolling, and a bunch of other stuff. But I do hope that these maps give a general idea of the appropriate size and focus of the zone. I view these as something that is a bit of a fantasy map to serve as a starting point for discussion on what proper congestion pricing may look like. Based on the data, I came up with this shape for Bangkok, and I'll admit it's a bit of a mess. The line follows highways, arterial roads, the Bangkok city boundary, and the Chao Phraya River. The top does kind of look like a dog, so I guess that's cool. Bangkok did publicly announce in October of 2024 that they plan to roll out congestion pricing, but as far as I can tell, they haven't clearly defined where. They've only mentioned inner Bangkok and mentioned a few rail corridors that could be the first places to pilot. If anyone knows more, please let me know in the comments. Number 4 on the list, Manila, Philippines. Manila has bad, but not the worst traffic, ranking 27th on TomTom's index. This isn't even the worst ranking traffic in the Philippines, which goes to Davao City. But Manila already restricts vehicles through their Unified Vehicle Volume Reduction Program, and they have favorable geography for setting up congestion pricing. Manila has 3 ring roads which could work, but based on the traffic patterns, I think following the middle ring road makes the most sense. Quezon City would be an obvious spot to expand the zone, since the corridor between Manila and Quezon City is probably the busiest between any 2 cities in the Philippines. Number 3, we're sticking in Southeast Asia. Let's go to Jakarta. Jakarta was middle of the pack on congestion, but does have decent and improving transit through the city center and a history of congestion regulation, albeit not always so successful. The city used to have a so-called 3-in-1 program, which required carpooling in the city center. That program has been dialed down quite a bit, to put it lightly, but they still have some dynamically provided toll roads and seemingly some political precedent for managing congestion. Similar to Manila, there's a few ring roads you could follow here, and the second one fits traffic congestion and transit service the best. So I propose a route following the Jakarta Outer Ring Road, which also aligns roughly with the jurisdictional boundary of Jakarta. For the top two, I promise you, we're out of Southeast Asia. But before we get to them, please do remember to like and subscribe if you want your feed to be more congested with videos on congestion and other international transportation topics. Patreon help, also appreciated, for those feeling generous or for those that just want to pick up one of these stylish t-shirts. Let's go to a few honorable mentions, which round out the top 10 of the list. Brazil has 2 cities in the top 10, and you'll never guess what they are. Yeah, obviously Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo in particular has had road space rationing since the 90s, with dynamic tolling and several attempts also to implement congestion pricing in the last 20 years. So, are they going to get the congestion pricing before or after the new rail link to Rio? Maybe you could even use the congestion pricing to pay for the rail, or you could even use it to fix those NFL practice fields. The possibilities are endless. Los Angeles was the only US city on the top 10. It's notorious for its traffic, at least by American standards. It's also notorious for bad transit, although it is improving quite fast. LA is the only city on the top 10 where I'm really not sure where you would focus the congestion zone, given how polycentric the city is. This is the only city on the list where you may actually start it outside of the city center. West LA does typically generate more traffic than downtown. Santiago, Chile, by far the top 10 city with the lowest congestion score, but it did climb up the list given that it has decent transit, despite their notorious fare evasion rate, and good marks on the other metrics. Istanbul rounded out the top 10. It was the only city on this list to represent Europe and or West Asia and or the Middle East or whatever region of the world this city is in. They've had recent discussions about congestion pricing in Istanbul, so certainly a place to keep an eye on. Now let's go look at the top 2 on the list. Number 2, Bogota. Bogota ranks high on this list because they have a bit of everything. They rank in the top 20 for congestion. They have excellent transit to and through the city core, even more impressive since it's mostly BRT. It has an established car reduction program, Pico y Placa, which only lets cars drive into the city center 2 days a week during peak times. And it has a mountainous topography that defines the city. Based on traffic, I'm proposing a zone through the main north-south spine of the city. The zone abuts the mountains to the east, Avenida Boyaca to the west. It ends just south of the Candelaria and cuts across Calle 134 to the north. And the number 1 city that can benefit from congestion pricing, Mexico City. Mexico gets a perfect score on my rubric, 20 out of 20 points. It's the number 1 congested city on the TomTom Index. It has excellent transit, both metro and BRT in the urban core. It has the existing Hoy No Circula program that restricts cars based on license plates into the city center. And it has a ring road that nearly perfectly matches where the congestion is worse and the transit is best. Anyone who frequents Mexico City regularly knows just how much of a burden traffic can be. I know people personally who leave 2+ hours for their commute, which could be completed in less than 30 minutes in free flow conditions. Now, time for my preachy conclusion on what to do with this top 5 list. Let's be real, congestion pricing is currently unpopular in most cities in the world. But I have hope, given that it's most popular in cities that actually use it, and it may even be more so with drivers that actually pay it. Just like many new ideas and policies throughout history, you typically see a very slow acceptance at first, with many viewing it even as a taboo, but then there's a rapid uptake after you reach a critical mass. By focusing on these cities that have the best use cases for congestion pricing, we can reach that critical mass more quickly and with more proof positive that congestion pricing works. So if you live in a city that's considering congestion pricing, my ask is just don't immediately oppose it, even if you do drive. Look at the results from other cities, look at how it could impact you directly, both for good and for bad, and then make an informed decision. And if you happen to live in one of these top 10 cities, consider going one step further and actually championing the idea proactively. Talk to your neighbors, attend your local city hearings, and help get congestion pricing out of the taboo and into the public discourse. You might not only help your own city, but help us all become more informed on how we can travel just a little bit better. That's all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.